You're smart. You'll figure it out. Mom said it while stirring her coffee, like she hadn't just admitted to stealing my future. 18 years of birthday money, graduation gifts, and promises, all gone to fund my brother's potential. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded, walked out of that kitchen, and started figuring it out. For years later, when I walked into a federal bankruptcy courtroom and saw my parents sitting at the defendant's table, the look on their faces told me they finally understood. I had figured it out better than they ever imagined. Before I tell you what I said when the judge asked about conflicts of interest, I need you to drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And ask yourself this: if the people who were supposed to protect your dreams were the ones who destroyed them, how far would you go to rebuild? My name is Simone. I'm 26 years old, and I grew up in a split-level house in suburban Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the kind of neighborhood where everyone had matching lawns and mismatched secrets. From the outside, we were the picture of middle-class normalcy. My father, Gerald, worked as a mid-level manager at an insurance company. My mother, Patricia, was a part-time bookkeeper who spent more time managing our family's image than our finances. And my older brother, Wesley, was the sun around which our entire household orbited. Wesley was 3 years older than me and had been declared gifted since kindergarten. At least, that's what my parents believed. In reality, Wesley was charming, manipulative, and spectacularly average. He coasted through school on charisma and excuses. When he failed a class, it was the teacher's fault. When he crashed a car, it was the other driver's fault. When he couldn't hold down a job, it was the economy's fault. Nothing was ever Wesley's fault. I, on the other hand, learned early that everything was my responsibility. I was the kid who made straight A's without anyone noticing. The one who packed her own lunches, walked herself to school, and figured out how to apply for scholarships because no one offered to help. My parents attended every single one of Wesley's baseball games, even when he spent most of the season on the bench. They missed my academic decathlon championship because they forgot it was that weekend. Different children, different standards. That was just how it worked in our house. But I had one thing that kept me going: my college fund. Grandma Dorothy, my father's mother, had started it when I was born. Every birthday, every Christmas, every random Tuesday when she felt like it, she'd add money. When she passed away during my freshman year of high school, she left specific instructions in her will. Her remaining savings should be split between Wesley's fund and mine, with clear documentation that the money was for education only. By my senior year, that fund had grown to nearly $80,000. Not Harvard money, but enough for a state school with room to spare. I'd been counting on it, building my entire future around it. Then came the kitchen conversation. It was 3 weeks before high school graduation. I'd been accepted to the University of Wisconsin with a partial academic scholarship. The college fund would cover the rest, plus living expenses. I had a plan. I had a path. I had hope. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table when I came down for breakfast that morning. Dad had already left for work. Wesley was still asleep, as usual. "Simone, sit down," Mom said, not looking up from her coffee. "We need to talk about your college plans." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "I was looking at the housing options," I started. "If I get a single room." "There's no money for a single room," Mom interrupted. "There's no money for any room." The words didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" "The fund has almost 80,000, had." Mom finally looked at me. Her expression wasn't apologetic. It wasn't guilty. It was the face of someone who had already justified their decision and didn't appreciate being questioned. "We used it." "Used it for what?" "Your brother needed capital for his business venture. You know how important this opportunity is for him." Wesley's business venture. I knew about it vaguely. Some kind of app development thing he'd been talking about for months, despite having no coding skills, no business experience, and no track record of finishing anything he started. "You used my college fund," I said slowly, making sure I understood, "for Wesley's app idea." "It's not an idea. It's an investment." Mom stirred her coffee. "Your brother has real potential. He just needs the right opportunity. You, Simone, you're different. You're smart. You'll figure it out." She said it like a compliment. Like being smart was compensation for being robbed. "That money was from Grandma," I whispered. "She specifically said it was for my education." "Your grandmother isn't here anymore. And we're your parents. We made a decision that was best for this family." Mom stood up, conversation apparently over. "You have a scholarship, don't you? Get loans like everyone else. Work part-time. You'll be fine. You always are." I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after she left. The scholarship covered tuition, but without the fund, I couldn't afford housing, books, food, any of it. I'd have to take out massive loans, work full-time while studying full-time, sacrifice everything I'd planned. Meanwhile, Wesley would wake up at noon, eat breakfast our parents paid for, and play at being an entrepreneur with my grandmother's money. I didn't cry that morning. I'd learned years ago that crying didn't change anything in our house. Instead, I started figuring it out. The next 4 years were brutal. I deferred my enrollment for a semester and worked 3 jobs to save enough for first-year expenses. Waitressing at a diner. Night shifts at a warehouse. Weekend tutoring for high school kids whose parents actually cared about their education. When I finally started college, I chose accounting as my major. Not because I loved numbers, but because I understood that money was the language my family spoke. If I was going to survive in a world where people like my parents made the rules, I needed to understand how the game was played. I worked 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load. I lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, a basement unit with questionable plumbing and neighbors who screamed at each other at 2 a.m. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for months. I declined every party invitation, every spring break trip, every normal college experience. I graduated in 3.5 years, magna cum laude, with a degree in forensic accounting and a specialization in bankruptcy and financial restructuring. While I was building my future from the wreckage of their theft, my family was building something else, a disaster. I kept loose tabs on them through the occasional awkward phone call and obligatory holiday visits I learned to keep short. From what I gathered, things weren't going well. Wesley's app had failed within 8 months. The $80,000, my entire college fund, was gone. He'd moved back home, supposedly to regroup, and had been regrouping for 3 years. Dad's company had gone through layoffs, and he'd taken a significant pay cut. Mom's bookkeeping clients had dried up. But instead of adjusting their lifestyle, they doubled down on denial. They refinanced the house, maxed out credit cards, took out loans to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. Wesley needed new car. Wesley needed spending money. Wesley needed support while he figured out his next big idea. Different children, different standards. Always. I learned most of this not from my family, but from public records. When you become a forensic accountant, you develop a habit of checking things. And what I found in those records painted a picture of financial collapse in slow motion. Then came the bankruptcy filing. I was working at a boutique accounting firm in Chicago when my boss called me into his office. We specialized in bankruptcy cases, helping courts navigate complex financial restructurings. Got a new case, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. Family in Wisconsin. Small business owner, personal bankruptcy tied to business debts. Court needs an independent accountant to review their assets and verify their disclosures. You're from Wisconsin, right? Thought you might want this one. I opened the folder. The names at the top were Gerald and Patricia Morrison. My parents. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The universe has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Everything okay? My boss asked. I should have disclosed the conflict immediately. That's what ethics demanded. That's what any normal person would do. But I wasn't feeling particularly normal. I was feeling like an 18-year-old girl sitting at a kitchen table, being told her future had been stolen and she should just figure it out. Everything's fine, I said. I'll take the case. I spent 2 weeks reviewing their finances before the hearing. And what I found was worse than I expected. The bankruptcy filing claimed they had minimal assets and couldn't pay their creditors. Standard story. But as I dug deeper, irregularities emerged. They'd transferred the title of their car to Wesley 6 months before filing, a clear attempt to hide assets from creditors. They'd sold furniture and jewelry to relatives for pennies on the dollar, planning to buy it back after bankruptcy discharged their debts. They'd underreported income from Mom's cash bookkeeping clients. In other words, they weren't just bankrupt. They were committing bankruptcy fraud. And they'd been sloppy about it. Years of cooking books for themselves had made them arrogant. They assumed no one would look too closely. They didn't know their forensic accountant had been trained to find exactly these kinds of discrepancies. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October. Federal courthouse in Milwaukee, the same city where I'd grown up invisible. I dressed carefully that morning. Professional blazer, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I looked like exactly what I was, a competent expert witness who knew things the court needed to hear. When I walked into the courtroom, I saw them before they saw me. Mom was wearing her court outfit, a conservative dress she probably thought projected respectability. Dad looked older than I remembered, grayer, smaller. Wesley wasn't there, of course. Wesley was never around for consequences. They were conferring with their lawyer, heads bowed, voices low. They hadn't looked up when I entered. I took my seat at the accountant's table and arranged my files. I had 14 pages of documented discrepancies. Every hidden asset. Every fraudulent transfer. Every lie they told the court. The judge called the hearing to order. Preliminary statements were made. And then it was time for the independent accountant's report. Ms. Morrison, the judge said, glancing at his papers, you've been assigned to review the debtor's financial disclosures. Before we proceed, I need to ask, do you have any conflicts of interest with the parties involved? I looked up. My parents' heads turned toward me for the first time. Mom's face went white. Dad's mouth fell open. I smiled. Just one, Your Honor. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Mom gripped the edge of the table. Dad looked like he might be having a heart attack. Their lawyer's head swiveled between me and his clients, trying to understand what was happening. The debtors, I continued calmly, are my parents. The judge's eyebrows rose. I see. And you didn't disclose this conflict prior to today because? Because I wanted to see if they'd disclose it first. I've been listed as their daughter in multiple financial documents over the years. If they were being honest with this court, they would have mentioned that their estranged daughter works as a forensic accountant in exactly this field. I paused. They didn't. Mom found her voice. Simone, what are you doing here? I ignored her and addressed the judge. Your Honor, I understand if you want to assign a different accountant to this case. I'll recuse myself from the final determination. But before I do, I believe the court should see what I found. My personal relationship with the debtors doesn't change the numbers. And the numbers are concerning. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Proceed with your preliminary findings. We'll address the conflict issue afterward. I opened my folder. During my review, I identified multiple discrepancies between the debtor's sworn disclosures and verifiable financial records. Mom's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, given the obvious conflict. Sit down, the judge said sharply. I want to hear this. I walked through it methodically. The car transfer to Wesley. The undervalued sales to relatives. The unreported income. Each point was supported by documentation, bank records, and public filings. With every word, I watched my parents shrink. Mom's practiced composure crumbled. Dad stared at the table like he wanted it to swallow him. In my professional opinion, I concluded, these discrepancies suggest a pattern of intentional misrepresentation. The debtors appear to have concealed assets and underreported income with the intent to defraud their creditors. The judge made notes. Mom's lawyer requested a recess. The judge denied it. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, he said sternly, these are serious allegations. Bankruptcy fraud is a federal offense. I'm ordering a full investigation. Your discharge is suspended pending review. Mom started crying. Not elegant tears, but ugly, desperate sobs. Simone, she gasped, how could you do this? We're your family. I gathered my files and looked at her directly for the first time. Family, I repeated quietly. You stole my college fund and told me to figure it out. You gave everything to Wesley and left me with nothing. You forgot my graduation. You missed my life. And now, when your choices finally caught up with you, you want to invoke family. I stood up. I figured it out, Mom. Just like you said I would. I figured out that people who steal from their children aren't family. They're just people who happen to raise you. Dad finally spoke, his voice hoarse. We never meant to hurt you. We just thought Wesley needed more help. Wesley needed consequences, I interrupted. Instead, you taught him that there would always be someone else to pay for his failures. First it was me. Then it was your creditors. Then it was this court. You didn't help him, Dad. You broke him. And you broke yourselves in the process. I walked toward the door. Simone, wait. Mom's voice was desperate. What happens now? What are we supposed to do? I stopped but didn't turn around. Figure it out. I walked out of that courtroom and didn't look back. The aftermath unfolded over the following months. A different accountant was assigned to complete the case review. The findings remained the same. My parents were charged with bankruptcy fraud, 2 counts of concealing assets, 1 count of making false statements. They avoided prison, barely. Dad got 2 years of probation and community service. Mom got 18 months of the same, plus mandatory financial counseling. They were ordered to repay their creditors through a structured plan that would take decades. Wesley finally had to get a job. A real one. I heard through distant relatives that he's working as a shift manager at a retail store, still living at home, still convinced he'll make it big someday. Some people never learn. My parents lost the house. The one they'd refinanced and leveraged and clung to as proof that they were still doing okay. It was sold to pay creditors, and they moved into a small apartment on the side of town they used to look down on. Mom tried reaching out a few times. Emails I didn't open. Voicemails I deleted without listening. A handwritten letter I read once and then burned. In the letter, she said she was sorry. That she understood now why I did what I did. That she hoped someday I could forgive her. Maybe I will. Someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. And understanding your mistakes doesn't undo them. I'm still figuring things out. I left the bankruptcy firm 6 months after the hearing. The case had been a conflict of interest, and even though I disclosed it before providing testimony, the situation had become too complicated. I left on good terms, with a recommendation letter that praised my skills and my ethics. Now I run my own forensic accounting practice. I specialize in helping people uncover financial abuse, the kind that happens in families, in businesses, in relationships where one person holds the money and the other holds nothing but broken promises. I paid off my student loans last year. Every penny I borrowed because my college fund was stolen, paid back with interest, through my own work. I bought a condo in Chicago. Small, but mine. I furnished it myself, with things I chose, paid for with money I earned. When I sit on my couch and look around at my life, I see nothing that was given to me by people who didn't mean it. Sometimes I think about my grandmother. About the fund she built with birthday checks and Christmas deposits, money she wanted to give me a future she never got to see. I like to think she'd understand what I did. That protecting yourself from the people who hurt you isn't betrayal. It's survival. And sometimes I think about that morning in the kitchen. The coffee. The casual cruelty. The dismissal disguised as a compliment. You're smart. You'll figure it out. I did figure it out, Mom. I figured out that being smart means nothing if you let people take advantage of you. I figured out that loyalty to family isn't the same as loyalty to abuse. I figured out that sometimes the only way to rebuild your future is to let the people who destroyed it face the consequences they earned. I figured out that I was worth more than they ever gave me credit for. And I figured out that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming someone they can't ignore, can't dismiss, can't reduce to an afterthought. I'm not an afterthought anymore. I'm the one who shows up when the numbers don't add up. The one who finds the truth hidden in spreadsheets and bank statements. The one who helps other people figure it out, the way I had to figure it out alone. If you're watching this and someone has told you you're smart enough to survive being mistreated, I want you to know something. You're smart enough to do more than survive. You're smart enough to thrive. To build something they can't touch. To become someone they underestimated. And when they finally need you, when their choices catch up with them and they come looking for help, you're smart enough to walk away. Figure that out. If this story resonated with you, share yours in the comments. And subscribe, because the next story might be the one you needed to hear all along.